David, how's it going?
Good, good. Yeah, good. Just settling back into my place and just been arranging the studio, getting ready to start working again.
Fantastic. So where in the world are you now? In Berlin, I assume.
I'm in Berlin, Germany. Yes. And hold on, I can change my name so that it's a bit more, because David.
Of Berlin.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in Berlin. I'm based in Berlin, but I was in Canada for the last 10 weeks, visiting family who I hadn't seen in a long time, and I did a small residency there, and preparing work for. I'm doing a show in Rome in a few weeks, and then I'm doing another show in New York in the fall. So I started working on all these kind of new ideas I was developing over the past year or so, and they've been kind of like flourishing. And I did this residency that kind of like allowed that to really like flourish. And I went way up north in Canada, and it was quite cold and isolated, but it was a great space to work in.
Are you at liberty to touch on some of those ideas at all, or leave them still in the garage stealth mode?
Yeah, so it's all oil painting, and it's all oil painting. It's all very like colorful, and which is very different from my work in some ways. I think if you're familiar with my work, you can see that there is quite a lot of overarchingness in what I'm doing now, or what I'm going to be doing as well, in contrast maybe to what I was doing last year or the year before that, etc. And the work is, it's kind of like I'm kind of like tapping into something in the inner child on some level. So there's this kind of like juvenileness to the approach of the work. But I'm kind of I was really getting in touch with some of my core influences, especially like in minimalism. These like, I really was looking a lot at these early Donald Judd paintings, and I studied at the Kansas City Art Institute, which is like where Robert Morris went. So I was kind of getting in touch with these more minimal forms, David Smith, and really just getting more. I mean, I have a background in sculpture, so when I approach painting, I'm approaching it, I guess, from this material perspective, and so I'm working with scale as well as with color theory, and just getting really into the medium of oil, and then also working with more archetypal forms, archetypal themes. There's a lot of like reference to the tarot, as well as to like Platonic concepts and forms, and so I'm really kind of digging into that, but through this very like contact with the inner child. So there's something very like innocent about it, but also very playful, but also very like I'm trying to make it as profound, in like a profound way, so we'll see how it goes. And then the work for Italy is going to be a large diptych piece of like a kind of a broken sun, and then a large, very flat, kind of almost illustrative, but it's very painterly, eagle, which is kind of a blown up image from the Terre de Marseille, and then a number of like studies of color theory, but also light, and also I did a lot of like meditations on the moon, and so there's a lot of like natural science in there. That's where I'm getting at with like Platonism. Maybe I'm a bit more of like a Neoplatonist when I approach these things. So there's something kind of mystical / like esoteric about it. But then that like there's kind of a spiritual engagement with the work, so that's what I'm trying to do more. And this has been kind of ongoing for me the last few years of moving away from a digital practice, which is what I was kind of doing for a long time, into a more traditional practice, but also kind of still getting in touch with maybe more of my roots in minimalism as well as like formalism and things like that.
I want to say that perhaps you've kind of quickly featured some of these studies on your social as of late.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm kind of like being very slow about it. I'm still just kind of and then also kind of also revealing more like portraits and stuff like that of myself, which I really wasn't doing for most of my practice. I was always kind of like detaching myself from what I was sharing, especially online. But I feel like that's changing. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of allowing my identity or my persona to take more of a position in the work, as well as my practice, I guess.
How does that feel?
It's definitely like a different feeling. It's not something I'm not totally unfamiliar with. I've always been very into writing. I've always been into journaling, and always been into kind of something more on a sensitive, a more personal level. And sometimes I'm doing some posts that are more kind of like a journal or a blog. And so, yeah, doing things where I'm like kind of showing myself in the studio or doing some artist portraits, they feel like they're kind of in line with some of that stuff I've done in the past. So it doesn't feel too weird, but yeah, I'm still getting used to it. I'm still I'm still kind of getting over some resistance, I suppose.
A little bit of like a Alfred Hitchcock of sorts.
Yeah, maybe something like that, I guess. Yeah.
Can you shout out the residency in Canada?
Well, it was a private residency. They're still building their official building.
Yeah.
It's through a collector of mine there, so they don't have an official name yet, but they invited me up because I was there, and I had to prepare for the show, and I stayed longer because for personal reasons, but also COVID at the time was kind of it was really uncertain what was going on at that time. Pardon. And so I decided to stay, and then I just went up north and started working. So kind of worked out. So I was like working in like a collector of mine's like car garage, but wow. It was a great space, actually. It was pretty great. And yeah, just really close to nature, and yeah, really getting the light, and really I was studying the light every single day. I had like sketchbook full of just color studies and palette studies from the light, and yeah, and then just waking up every day and painting every single day. So it was just a little bit of living the dream, so to speak.
No doubt. And when you're doing a sort of light and color study, as you were, are you finding that you are waking up at like actually a very programmed yet different time of the day every day, or are you trying to kind of make it more structured than that, or like how does that work?
Right. I have a pretty regimented daily routine, and from a spiritual practice of my, from the way that I practice and live my daily life, involves me waking up quite early and being more engaged with daylight. So, when the sun goes down, I'm getting more ready for the evening and going to bed. And when I like to be up as the sun goes up. So more kind of a natural way of living, so to speak. Acting in accordance with nature on some level. And so, I was really studying, especially morning light and evening light, and also how the light was engaging with nature there, especially because it was very snowy. So there's a lot of reflection and changes to the light through the forest and through the snow and everything like that. And so I was really like just observing that and not really questioning things. I was really trying to do away with all my background in like conceptual art, conceptual thinking, trying to disengage with overthinking what I'm doing and just be less, it's like being less present, but being more of like the agent in which the work is being created through, rather than being so controlling ahead of time of how the ideas are being developed. And I guess, so for me, that's why studies still work really well, because I can be more quick with it. I can be more engaged with what's happening right there and then. And it's not just photography. It's not just with my phone or with a camera, which I think my issue with photography now is like, if I take the picture, I feel done with it. And when I'm doing studies with the pencil or the charcoal or with the crayon or something like that, it feels like it's in a process to something, or it's becoming its own article in which I can refer to later. It has its own like aura, for lack of a better word.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's fascinating as well, because, you know, like you said, there's this delicate balance. Maybe I don't know. You didn't exactly say this, but what I took away from that was you're kind of navigating this balance between being present enough to kind of shut the door on some of your more trained tendencies, or, you know, you trained yourself for all these years to sort of think a certain way and then, you know, conduct yourself in a certain way. And then you're kind of saying, hey, no, I need to sort of almost be present enough to not do that, so that you can then usher in a different point of view.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to engage a little bit more with like non-dualistic thinking. So
Right.
it's not me versus what's out there. It's not me. It's not this, that, or the other. It's like I'm trying to be more present, like taking mindfulness into the practice of what I'm doing, and not overthinking things, just being and becoming simultaneously with the work. And I guess, just like you said, it's about trying to be more present, trying to use the tools at my disposal that allow me to act accordingly with what's happening around me presently, and how to engage a little bit more with the present itself. The last year, I mean, you can see some of it. I was doing a lot of life studies. I was doing a lot of more traditional kind of art, which is very observing and seeing and looking. And this new work is not exactly that, because I'm not doing representational, so to speak. It's more symbolic, I would say. But I would say that the color, or the use of the medium, the engagement with, especially the light, the environmental kind of energetic atmosphere is much more present, and that was what I was really trying to allow myself to be more fluid with that, to be more engaged, really, because I think I want to engage more with beauty, and that's where really it comes from, is that desire to be alive. And to me, beauty has a lot to do with balance in life, and the choice to live and things like that.
I love that. The choice to live. I think that, you know, not to take things down a crazy path, but obviously we're 5 whatever days into the conflict happening in the Ukraine at the moment, and I think that puts in stark relief everything that you're saying right now about living in the present, living in the moment, understanding how precious our balance in that dynamic is. You seem like somebody, and on that note, I mean, you mentioned that you do have friends over there in the Ukraine. I mean, just to touch on that quickly.
Yeah, it's been an unsettling return to Europe. And yeah, I have a number of friends in Kiev who I'm really just trying to every day just check in on them, ask them questions about things that maybe gave a smile to their day, or some sort of kindness that happened in their day, so that they can find a bit of little gratitudes in kind of an atmosphere of danger and fear, and and on top, of course, donating my energy and my energy, especially to and resources to helping the situation there as best I can.
No, for sure.
Anyways, there's a feeling of powerlessness that's quite overwhelming when it comes to, I think, something like war, something in much way like the start of the pandemic. There was this great wave of powerlessness that I think a lot of people were feeling. I was feeling especially, and and you can see kind of the results of that too. Now wherever we are now in the pandemic, there's still this kind of residualness, and what do people do when they're faced with such powerlessness? There's different ways to deal with it, and anyway.
No, that's what.
I don't want to go on a tangent, but
no,
yeah,
I know there's a theme in your work as well.
Pardon?
I know that powerlessness is a theme in your work, and it's actually something that I'm interested in touching on. As we get deeper into it, you were speaking about the choice of life and little gratitudes, and kind of the choice of beauty, and you being that you have what I can only imagine is a pretty well versed history in studying the classics, especially. I noticed that you mentioned something about Hellenism and that period. I've always been sort of fascinated about that, and this morning, as it would just kind of happen, I was like, whatever, kind of like online, and stumbled onto the Roman kind of, or Greco-Roman kind of discussion around the three graces, and what these three graces were intended to sort of represent, not only for the gods, but for mankind. And I've been particularly fascinated in terms of just reading more about your studies and how it seems like you have made a very conscious effort to kind of integrate, it would seem, some real classical thinking into your approach to things as a whole.
Yeah. Certainly. I would say in the last years, there has been a greater engagement with thinking of the antiquities, which I think in many ways was like a spiritual practice, or like it was a spiritual endeavor for those living in that time as well. And there was no, like, the cosmos was quite embodied with spiritual value at that time, and that's something that's not really as it's not as ubiquitous today, I would say. Like you can still, I think one can still engage with that. I think that these ideas, this way, this worldview, this way of engaging with the world never dies. It's only whether or not we choose to engage with it or not that it becomes alive within us as well. So yeah, I've been more drawn to it for many reasons. And I think like when it comes to maybe more of a more modern philosophical lineage, I'm kind of thinking of Kant or Schopenhauer, where art or culture is its purpose or its value is to in many ways keep us alive, or to help us to engage with the world beyond its mundanity, so to speak. It like revitalizes us, and it does that in many different ways. And I guess the way I'm trying to engage with it is maybe a bit more with the poetics, a bit more of the the substance of tragedy, so to speak. But in triumph and tragedy, kind of both. And so when I think about the ancient world and how does that take place in the here and now, I think there's different ways of engaging with that, and some of them I think have to do with worldview, have to do with our relationship to free will versus fate or something like that. I guess I follow pretty closely like a Stoic perspective on some things, like a classic Stoicism, not maybe what the word has been transmuted into in the modern age. You
got a lot of modern Stoics out there these days, it seems.
Yeah. So, and then I practice I have like a Zen Buddhist practice. So, which I feel there's a lot of crossover between antiquity philosophies and Eastern philosophies as well. Like if you go back far enough, it's pretty shocking how much cross-pollination takes place.
No, look, I 1,000% with you there. I in college did a fair amount of courses in that lane, just because the professors at my school were particularly kind of respected for that subject matter, and so a lot of people just sort of would gravitate towards those classes, just because you're like, wow, like I'm going to learn about something that's obviously had a huge impact on the world, but I'm also going to learn it from somebody that's a renowned kind of person in their field for it.
Right.
And the thing about that world, that time, that classic era, that I think constantly captivates me is the intersectional nature of it. Because they had a very healthy respect for the past and for learning and for self-leadership, and at the same time they didn't seem and I mean, who are we to say, right? It's so long ago, but at the same time it just seems like they weren't as maybe as hung up or as seduced by the vintage kitsch didn't exist back then. And so if something was worth carrying forward in order to then intersect with something else, it immediately almost became an instant classic for them as well.
And it was actually a very multicultural world.
Yeah.
And this kind of cross-pollination, so many cultures in the Hellenistic world. I think people don't realize how much crossovers between Egyptian and Mesopotamian and the Far East as well as pagan traditions and things like that. They were happening all simultaneously, and then at the same time, like mathematics and the philosophies were starting to really blossom at that time. Now, I don't want to totally like glorify that time, because there were a lot of things that were compared to maybe our values now don't really align, such as slavery. You know, that was pretty common back then.
Sure.
But I think that what was lost in many ways was how looking at opposites, because I think back then it was all about the interplay between opposites, like positive and negative were not just two things on a pole. They were things to be conversed with, like they were things to be seeing where they blend, where they don't blend. And I think that kind of perspective on life, there's something very beautiful about that. And I think that maybe not is completely lost. I think now we live in a very pluralistic age where anything is possible. Like there's space, there's so many people in the world now, there's so much access to information and things happening simultaneously that any sort of thought group can take place, like, and can flourish and can have followers and culture of its own. So that's something very unique about our time. I think that it's not linear anymore. But maybe on a more overarching level, I think that the nuances of opposites interplaying has been on some level lost, I think. I'm talking very abstractly now, but
No.
I'm not a philosopher, I'm just an artist, but
I'm right there with you though. No. I think that there's a synthesis that does not happen as often today.
right.
Maybe there's an attempt to make that happen in certain areas of entertainment, just because they're always searching for a way to sort of spin up a new kind of concept or dynamic or way to present an entertainer even. But yeah, no, our ability to synthesize different things definitely seems to be one area where we need to kind of develop new muscles again, or just muscles again. I want to bring up a quote that I found on your Instagram, kind of that's adjacent to all this in the within the idea of being intersectional, and you actually use that word. So, you said that this particular work, it was a sculpture, and you were saying that it's a culmination of 10 years of working on a practice that aims at finding an intersecting place or meeting ground between ready-made, handmade, and manufacturing processes in art, which to me feels very sort of act 1, act 2, act 3 in a sense, from a timeline standpoint.
Yeah, I'm trying to piece together right now what exactly work we're talking about, but yeah, I think that has happened. That's been a big part of, I think, a process in my work. Sometimes is it's like, and I've always been very interested in hybridity. I think with these digital paintings, that was always maybe my core interest in them. It wasn't not so much the subject matter. It wasn't so much their engagement with any sorts of trends in art. It was really just like, I was really looking to try to make something that wasn't quite sculpture, wasn't quite painting, wasn't quite photography. Now, in a way, maybe that was like a weakness of the work. It didn't strike a chord with anyone. But with some of those sculptural works, they kind of are these pastiche pieces or collage. They kind of call back to me in some ways like blogging on some level. It's like, oh, I'm going to take this sort of topic I'm interested in, this sort of topic, and then mash them together in one sort of stream of imagery. And yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure I know what work you're talking about, but yeah, where on one level, it's just things that I've found or things that I've collected, maybe something I've actually made, or it's something very highly refined. And then also things that are ordered to be made. So I want this thing to be made. This is the idea, make this for me. So something manufactured versus something found maybe on the streets, or something from the shop, like from the grocery store. And how manufactured and how ready a world we live in, and yet at the same time we're always trying to manipulate it so that it feels more individual. And maybe that's where the sculpting takes place, is the desire to try and individualize the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak.
And I wasn't trying to be overly vague. I can tell you the name of the piece if you want.
Okay. Oh God, is it just another untitled though? Yeah.
Untitled, in parentheses, Burnout.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know this piece. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And one of the things that I very much appreciated was that within the medium that that you described in terms of putting this together, you list concrete first, then foam, and then here's my favorite last two: gear, and then debris.
Yeah.
And it immediately brought to my mind, because and I've seen that you've called out Rauschenberg in other things that you've done from an inspirational standpoint. I mean, I think I was my first or second year in high school when my mother bought me a book about Rauschenberg, and I was like just pretty drawn to this concept of the combine that he put together. And it seemed like something that was so sincere, yet I loved it because there was obvious like humor in it. That wasn't humor for the sake of humor even. But it made you kind of I don't know. I was like, I felt like there was this gravitational pull towards this unique kind of humor that I felt was really important in a really rewarding sense as well. So often today, I think that our sense of humor, especially in a meme-driven communication style that we all now have kind of fallen into, I don't know if it's always as rewarding as it should be for everybody. And
Grills.
Yeah. So I wanted to first just kind of touch on that with you, because the idea of the combine was clearly something that was very inspirational to me. And I know that you've also, you call out another work of his, Erased de Kooning, the drawing piece, and I just wanted to sort of ask, like, who are some of your other inspirations, whether it be Rauschenberg or somebody today?
Yeah, I love bringing up Rauschenberg. Again, I went to the Kansas City art at the time when I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Kansas City and study. Everybody was like, what the hell are you doing? Because everyone was like, go to Chicago, go to New York, go somewhere else. But I was like, no, I want to go to Kansas City. That's where Rauschenberg went. That's where Morris went. And maybe the school isn't the same it used to be. Of course, the teachers are different. But again, I was going to the place. It's also like where some of my family lineage comes from. Super cool. So I was kind of engaging with the past. So there's something about the past to me in the present. So there's some sort of time travel happening. And then also, trying to spend time somewhere where someone who looked at the world in a way that has been very, very influential on me took time to live, but not in the same place that everybody else would go, so to speak. I don't know if it worked out or not, but it was one of the most productive times I had spent when I spent a year there.
That's always a
And
great feeling.
and yeah, I mean, what I really love about Rauschenberg too is how he was thinking about the tabletop and this topography of looking at information, looking at things at the time. I mean, at the time, media was more paper based, right? So it was more magazines. I think magazines were only very fresh at the time, but you know, the radio, the newspaper, books, and you know, television was slowly coming in. And so yeah, when he was with this combines, to me it felt very like revolutionary to how one pieces together the world around them. It has a very like stream of conscious aspect to it, and I'm definitely very drawn to work that is really engaging with something on a more psychological level, like a internal, trying to refract out in some level the internal to external. Yeah, I'm never very good when people put me on the spot for like artists that they're into, but maybe I can kind of quickly flash into some that I, you know, always. I really, an artist who I really love now is Andrew Vakua. I don't know if you know Andrew Vakua, just in terms of like contemporary works. But let's see, what I've got. Yeah, Lee Krasner is someone I'm looking at a lot always. David Milne, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a Canadian painter. He's been very influential, I would say, on the work I was doing the last year. As well as like Seurat. Really love Seurat. And yeah, and then all the like the dead white guys. I don't know. I can't. Sure. But yeah, like, but I would say maybe someone who really drew me into painting would be like Cézanne. And the reason for that is not just the painting itself, but his way of living, which to me is a very spiritual way of living, in terms of that it's a practice. Like painting is not just a frivolous activity. It's very ambitious. You're gonna fail most likely, and it's a way of life. And if you can't do that, if you can't choose that, then what are you doing? And it's like, and I've never been one to be a tourist in my art, if that makes sense. So, you know, it saved my life on many occasions, and it's always been what I wanted to. You know, I don't know what else, like, it was always there and it was always happening. And it's like, even if I tried to deny it, it would come in. So, and to me, with Cézanne, he really embodies that, I suppose, from a modern art historical perspective. And yeah, I really want to engage again with maybe what it means to be a person in the world, you know, to be human, and how art is very human. And painting, I think, when engaged with as a daily practice, has something very spiritual about it, because you're really, like what I was doing at the residency, you're being present, you're engaging with your life in that moment in time, which also embodies like the internal and external. So that's where there's that non-dualistic being becoming happening, where maybe you're reflecting on, you know, memories and experiences, thoughts and feelings, but then you're also in the world. And so there's no kind of separation between the observer and the actor, so to speak. And that's something I think that Cézanne was engaging with quite a bit, and that really was very influential on art afterward.
within that sort of, I guess, frame of mind, and you, like you said, being a participant, who is contributing and absorbing these and living, like really truly living these places that you've been, and you've obviously spent a lot of time in the US, in Canada, and now in Europe. I mean, can you just sort of loosely describe just the experience of living as a working artist in each of these places and perhaps other places, um, Kansas City or other Berlin or otherwise?
Um, I suppose on a personal level, I think I've always been looking for, yeah, so sort of contact with the authentic, and also like some sort of sense of belonging in place. And I think that that desire maybe is never going to be fulfilled, right? And so whenever I've like lived somewhere or gone somewhere and really been somewhere, I mean, I've never been a very good tourist, so to speak. Like I really suck at like going somewhere and doing a whole tour around. Like I've done all that. I've done stuff like that back when I used to play in bands and stuff like that. But I always wanted I wanted to live somewhere. And so whenever I travel, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go here. And then I set up shop, and then that's where I live and exist. And yeah, if I reflect on, all those experiences, it's funny how whenever I go to those places, I'm still bringing along this life that I think I can leave behind. So it never, the place where I am is not obliterating my way of what I bring with me. And so in a way, it's interesting how place has its own being, and as well as the cosmos in which you bring with you. So
Right.
You can think of this kind of Zen idea that each of us is our own universe. The universe is you are the universe. But then places are also full of experiences and universes. So wherever you go, all of a sudden you're a part of that one too. It's like moving through different bodies of water, but you're still in the water.
Right. Like, at what point do you go from the Indian Ocean to the
Yes, yeah.
Atlantic or the Pacific?
What level is the salt more heavy than the other salt, but you're still in the water. So right. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
No, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. That's really interesting, especially given some of the other things that I think I find so intriguing about what you're doing, and the point of view that you have, about because when you think about it like that, it's like this constant, like, to bring it back to the water analogy of an ebb and a flow, like a tidal pattern, like you said, there's going to be an upwelling of colder water that displaces, something that was previously once there, and everything's in a state of flow, which is I think is always really interesting, especially when you bring in something like Zen Buddhism, which anybody who's done some martial arts can understand. A lot of the principles there are very side by side, and I think that once you then kind of take that existence, as somebody who's living like that, and you apply it to something very procedural like society.
Mm.
You know, society, the more I study it, the more systematic it becomes.
Mm.
Nature and our world as well.
Mhm.
And you know, you used a particular quote about the contemporary art system today, about with you were describing the grant systems as wanting them to be less bloody monotonous.
Right. Yeah. I think I was. I think I was being cheeky.
Yeah, but you know, I think that but you bring up a great point, because if we are always bringing these other places with us, and I'm like you know, if I go to, and you know, every single time that I've been to Tokyo, I always say, oh man, I'm gonna really experience. I used to work a lot in Japan, and so every single time I would go to Japan, I'd be like, man, this is gonna be the time where I'm just gonna truly get lost in Tokyo here.
Mm.
And then next thing you know, you've like really only kind of gotten so far in one little pocket, whether it be Shibuya or wherever else, right? Because it's just so big, and you have other things happening, and you're bringing, like you said, you're bringing other things to the party, and you're also absorbing new things, and you know, you're consciously trying to sort of, you know, find your way, I guess. And with the systems that are out there, in the world, especially, I could easily see, like you said, the grant systems for art being monotonous. That, you know, these systems stand in the way of that experience, I think, producing really excellent things all the time. You know, and that quote struck me because it resonated, I think, because not to sound too fluffy here, but William Blake has this collection called Songs of Innocence and Experience.
I haven't heard it.
Yeah, it's good. It's, you know, it's one of the kind of Hall of Fame players in the world of romantic poetry, I guess. And
You need to get in there.
yeah, and you know, just like bloody monotonous would, I think, for sure describe the songs of experience. And you know, and like what you're working on right now, like you said about the color studies and tapping into your inner child, you know, those are the songs of innocence that I think are vital
Yes.
to us being able to sort of surface and bubble up some things that are again going to resonate on that perhaps more humorous level for us as humans, even if we're not aware of it at the time or whatever. And again, I'm not trying to get too deep either over here, but you took me there, so
Cool.
there we are.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think this engagement with the inner child. Yeah, it's very much like, who is it that hasn't? Who is it that's shouting and not being heard? It's this. It's kind of. So when I sit in zazen and there's this question that comes up of like, who or why am I me? Or like, who is it the one that's asking the question? Or like, who is it the one that's breathing? And so with the painting, it's like, who is the one that wants to paint? And so that's who's painting. It's not just me. It's the one who wants to paint. And so that's just what I know that sounds very vague and difficult to articulate completely, but it's what voice wants to be heard, and if is that the voice that needs to be heard, I don't know, but it's the one that I will not deny. So yeah, and I think that's in some ways some of the subject matter I'm looking at, again, kind of looking out to the stars, looking out to the cosmos, so to speak, which from an antiquity perspective, the cosmos was simply the world itself. There was reality or existence, so to speak. So it wasn't just space out there. It was this, you, me, everything. Everything's cosmos, right? So when I'm looking out to things like the moon or stars or the sun, these are things that are exist all over. When I look at the moon, I'm looking at the same moon you look at. So there's no difference between that and the moon I'm looking at. Maybe the particles in the air where I am have more CO2 level than the particles of air where you are, or something like that. But otherwise, there's no difference between them. And that's something I'm trying to engage with more, because that's part, again, it's getting into the voice that wants to be heard is the same, maybe the same voice in a lot of us. I don't know.
And it's the voice that I think is ultimately responsible for that quote unquote process of art making, to where when the process is over, you oftentimes hear many people say, who did that? Like, there it is. That's the outcome of my process. But what is that? Who did that? That, and that it's a time capsule,
Yeah, and this is what I think frustrates me always, I suppose, with maybe with things about art. I suppose maybe this is the thing that frustrates me, is that whatever people see, that's what they see. There's nothing, they're not seeing all that it came to. And I suppose that's why I am interested in process-oriented work. Maybe some of the, like that sculpture, for instance, it's very like, it holds within it all that was used to make it too. So there's something like, it doesn't deny its lineage or like its history, so to speak. Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, and it feels like a important voice to engage with. Maybe not in a contemporary way, but maybe in a spiritual way. Because I don't know if whenever I try to engage with things that are more contemporary, there isn't a it's like trying to believe that my thoughts are defining me. It's like trying to and I have a hard time with that. Maybe that's something that's part of my own deficiency. Maybe that's something that disconnects me from reality. And maybe that's something I'm trying to engage with as well in the work, is that no matter how aware or unaware I am, there's always going to be pluses and minuses in all those areas. It's like I'm always going to be like the D&D character or something that existed and got rolled the dice, and some of my attributes are higher and some of them are lower, and you can look at those as privileges or inadequacies or however you want to look at them, but they're going to connect me or disconnect me for certain things. So how can I connect on as much of an overarching level as possible? And I think that's why I really want to engage more with something spiritual, something that is human, something that maybe, especially in, like you were touching on a bit, like in a capitalist society, we can just cash in on anything that's trending at the time. You can make a movie about it, make a show about it, whatever people think is like relevant and needs to be said, or that will make somebody money. It doesn't matter. Like that's legitimized now in the age we live in. But then what's deeper than that, and what kind of, even if it's cringeworthy, even if it's something that's too cheesy or something like that, like even if it's a cliche, it's still going to have value to it because it touches somewhere that we can't deny. Even if we kill every part of ourselves possible, even if we become, even if we engage with that which was in all of us, the capacity for evil completely, there's something, the conscience within us is still there. And, that's never going to go away, even if we smash it and nuke it or put it to war or whatever.
I know I love what you're saying, because I've often said that I think everybody has a tuning fork. I just think that we all have a tuning fork, and I think that fork is unique to each of us to an extent, but it also, of course, kind of rolls up to a greater frequency somewhere that we can feel. Not to sound too much like Malcolm Gladwell's thin slicing thing, but we can feel it. We know it. We see it.
Feelings unite us, actually.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I saved this part of the question here for the end, because I've never seen anybody put together kind of this survey about feeling powerless. Which is so interesting, because never before in society has humankind had a glowing rectangle in their hand that could produce an answer as fast as your thumbs could type in the right question.
Right.
So everybody knows kind of everything. Experience and innocence both go kind of out the window, because our experience as humans versus the machine, end quote. Where does that land? There's a certain powerlessness there as it relates to speed, accuracy, knowledge. I mean, fact checking is a whole nother one, I guess, but that's for another podcast.
Great for dealing with parents. Or like that family member who is always right?
Yeah.
Fact checking is great for that.
Fact checking is great for that.
Or saving yourself from, I guess, fake news or whatever. But
absolutely. And from my past life, I was in an industry with, I would say some strong personalities, and with every strong personality, there becomes a certain amount of belief in what they're doing and saying, and yet at the same time, getting back to our comment here about the tuning fork, you can pick up on someone puffing some hot air pretty quickly these days, and with your magic rectangle cell phone in your hand or not. And I think that that's also kind of maybe I'm answering part of your survey here in terms of where my comment on powerlessness can be, because you want to believe in the possibility to re-educate or to better inform, whatever the right way to describe it might be. And yet perhaps we don't think in that linear way enough. I don't know if linear, like we were saying about the classics, if they, discovered something that they didn't know previously, it perhaps could radically shift. Oh, no. This is actually how it is. That we didn't know this prior, but now we know it. Versus today, where you could present someone with the right answer to something, and because there's so much information out there, they refuse to accept that could be the answer. And, you know, I guess I was also curious, you know, not to uh, not to rip off your work here, David, but has anybody ever asked you the same survey questions in a lightning round kind of format, just
Mm.
just to sort of touch on them? Because I was so fascinated about this. Ask yourself, over what exactly am I powerless? And this is the first question, obviously, from your survey. And the first thing I think that came to mind for me was this idea of the earth and climate change, right? And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, man, if there's a common enemy that we have amongst many, right? That's got to be near the top of the list. And um and then you said make a list. I'm obviously recounting them to you here, but make a list of the life altering and influential experiences you've had in your life. And for me, I guess you could say that it was playing sports, and sports or art making, for me both, maybe other activities in your life, but they both represent this moment or moments that are just, they're over just like that. And there's such power in those moments, and then they're gone. Write 2 pieces on each of those experiences, long or short. We'll skip that one. Think about what powerlessness means to you personally, and then reread the writing. Good education practice for sure. And then, were you ever powerless in any of those experiences, and how? And then the last one, thinking about powerlessness, write a searching and fearless response about your experiences. And David, I'm very curious. Firstly, how the survey is going, and second, how often you kind of peel back the pages for yourself and readdress maybe some of these things, because it's a very fascinating slice, I guess, of how you're approaching what you're doing, one, and two, in a sense, an outline of, perhaps without sounding grandiose here, the modern human experience.
Yeah, I love that. I love that synthesis, and thank you for sharing that with me. Very generous. To be honest, I think that because I did the text, the survey, so to speak, in combination with this exhibition I did in Italy, and the gallery gave me permission to do whatever I wanted for this text, and I kind of used it as an outreach piece. Because at the time, I think it was just, it was still the same year of the first year, I think it was 2020. So it was still the pandemic, quite fresh in people's experience. And I wanted to offer a tool that has been very helpful for me to engage with situations or circumstance or experience that is overwhelming and that produces this sense of powerlessness, and also to try and re-engage with powerlessness not just as a negative thing, that it's like a teaching. It teaches. We're getting taught through everything that happens, and so thank you for doing a crash course in it. To be honest. Nobody else really did it, actually. I think it takes a lot of courage to engage with these things. So, well done.
No, thank you. I mean, it's as a teaching tool. As I researched about what I think that your, like I said, approach might be, it was really rewarding because I felt like I was the one receiving the education.
Mm.
So I should be the one thanking you for putting it out there like that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it was just about people engaging with themselves. And if they learned something, actually, they taught themselves, they did it for themselves. And maybe people did it and they didn't tell me about it and they didn't send me anything about it. And that's okay. That I didn't do it. I didn't offer it to anyone as something to make their lives more difficult. It was like to be a gift. So
it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's the opposite. I released expectation. So no qualms about that. How often do? I mean, I suppose every day, because for me, powerlessness is like I really have no power. I mean, I can choose to do things. I mean, of course, I have power in the world. I have the ability to do things and not do things. And I can make things worse. I can make things really worse if I want to. And I try to live each day trying to do the next right thing. But I occupy space in this world, and I think also being in the Western world, being white, being male, being someone who occupies space in there's things that are being excluded from the world because of my inclusion in the world. So I'm not like deluded by that. And so I think for me, powerlessness has a lot to do with people. I have no power over anyone.
Mm.
I can, of course, I can engage with evil actions and force things onto others. But at the end of the day, they still hold within them their them, and I will never have that ability to own that. So, what people do, what people think, what people feel, what people are, that is outside of my range of control. And also in many things in myself, like I'm not going to be able to control that I think and feel. Those are just going to keep happening. And I'm glad that they do. Thank God. Like, I'm really glad that they do. And I'm really glad that my stomach keeps working. My heart keeps pumping. All these things that I could be like, I don't want you to do that anymore, but they're going to keep doing it. So thank God for that. And it's the same way I feel about the external world too. I can huff and I can puff. I can make my life more miserable and those around me more miserable. But is it going to actualize exactly what I want? Doubtful, very doubtful. So why make things more miserable? I suppose that's what I meant by making that survey, is like, if I can, why make suffering greater?
Mm.
And not just for others, but for myself. Maybe more importantly for myself. And I've never been very good at decision making. So that's one tool that I try to use to help me to make decisions, is like, what's my motivation? Is it one that comes from love, or is it one that comes from resentment? What am I actually, in this, I don't know if you know the serenity prayer,
Yeah. Wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, wisdom to know the difference. That's what that survey is about, is what's the difference between, things I can change and things I can't. And then listen to your conscience in that. I don't know. That makes sense. and then I guess that's what I try to engage more with my art. And I'm not sure if it comes out or not, but that is what I'm trying to engage more with. And that's what I mean by beauty, I suppose, is that balance, the peace, in the traditional, I took antiquity perspective, you know, the goddess Athena or Aphrodite, the balance, the peace, the weighing of opposites, the abject and the aesthetic. Where do the, you know, and to be in line with those, the mundane and the divine, and those kind of crossovers, and is it, you know, and to accept failure and to not get too attached to any outcomes from that. And yeah, I think that's where I kind of have found myself in my work, where I think what is kind of known most about my work is something more technical, something more kind of, I don't know, technology engaged, which I don't think has necessarily died for me. Maybe that's actually what led me to where I am now. It's like that there's questions that are not being answered. And maybe that's part of being human, is that, you know, it's not up to me to have answers for everything. It's just about engaging with things that I believe in.
That's really great. That's really fascinating and very inspiring. I was gonna ask you as a follow-on if you just could provide a simple recommendation that you find that works for you in your regimen somehow. But I think that what you just said is at least one recommendation that I you know, can apply to what I'm going to do for the rest of my day today or the rest of my week or whatever, is to engage in things that I believe in. Because we don't, I mean, you know, not to get into the teachings here of the Buddha, but, you know, samsara and suffering, and like you said, you can always make it worse. But you don't necessarily need to do that if you're instead more actively engaged in things that you are just more drawn to, things that you believe in.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that we all wake up every day. And that's not going to change.
Well, look, I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to connect here and review, you know, these kinds of questions. I learned a ton just from our conversation just now, and can't thank you enough, you know, for the work that you're doing, you know, and the intention that you put obviously behind not only the work and the outcome, but the approach to it and the process. So
thank you, John. Yeah, thanks for holding space for this. It's really generous of you. And yeah, I'm really, it's really great to meet fans and people who want to like reach out and stuff. You are as much keeping it going as I am. So thank you. And yeah, I'm really excited also to share more of the new work. There's going to be an exhibition opening on March 19th at White Noise Gallery in Rome. It's a duo show with Richie Culver and myself. Him and I collaborate and are quite close, but also very different practices. So it's going to be interesting. And the show is on, the title of the show is Fate and Fortune. And so we're both engaging from our own works with those kind of concepts, and how, it feels very relevant for our times. Maybe it always is going to, but maybe people can touch in with that even more, especially from the pandemic, now war, all the things that have happened even in recent history, and how each of those things leads to something else. Each of us have our own personal fortunes and losses that have taken place, and then doing it in a city like Rome, which is where the Roman Empire was situated, and how much of that ancient world, like they kind of carried forward, like they were the most of the Hellenistic period was taking place during the Roman Empire, and how much of that time feels very now too, in many ways. So things never die, they just keep going in cycles. And I think that's just like what you were saying, the ebbs and the flows, just like the way the moon gets full and empties, just like the tides come in, they come out, just like we wake up every day. There's cycles that are going to take place, regardless if we're conscious of them or not. And I think that's what this show is kind of getting on some levels. I'm going kind of on a tangent, but yeah, with our work coming together, and I think it's going to be it's very exciting. We're all very excited about the show. And I'm going to go down to Rome. I don't know if you've ever been, but absolute beautiful place. And just excited to have work in that context too. So
it's been a while since I've been to Rome. I was fortunate enough to live in Italy for a time when I was in college. And I'm half Italian. My mother's mother. So my mother's first generation. My mother's mother's from a city called Bari on the East Coast. And couldn't agree with you more. I think that people, wax poetic about Rome for a lot of really genuine reasons. And it's a magical place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's like when I like Athens or even like Tokyo, or there's only one Rome, and until it's one of those places I highly encourage people, if they have a chance to go, they should just to go, because there's no place like Rome in the world, really. It's a special place.
Well, I mean, and I'm absolutely fascinated to just continue the dialogue at some point in time, not only about this upcoming show. By the way, where in Rome is White Noise? Is it?
It's on the same side of the Tiber as the Forum. I can't remember the exact neighborhood, what it's called, but it's not too far walking distance from the Capitoline Hill or the Forum. It's not so far. Yeah.
Okay. What a fascinating and awesome show. I have a great amount of respect and appreciation for the work that Richie Culver does as well as the sense of humor that he puts out there on a regular basis.
He's on it. He doesn't hold back the voice, so to speak.
No, it's wonderful. It sounds like a brilliant show, and would obviously be thrilled and honored to have you back, so to speak, to talk about some of this kind of stuff a second time.
Absolutely, yeah. Pleasure. The pleasure would be mine.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day out there in Berlin, and all the best, and let's talk soon.
John, take care. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.